Mr. President.
Senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, I rise to discuss the spending bill, which we're about to vote on, which is going to increase our deficit by almost $250 billion over 10 years, and of which I think I might be the first speaker. We're going to vote on this. We got it yesterday, Monday maybe, and we're going to vote on it tomorrow. And I smile, Mr. President, because this is supposed to be the world's greatest deliberative body, and we've not deliberated one bit on far-ranging policies. Now, by the way, the mess is kind of bipartisan. We can spread the blame around. But let me bring up the heart of it. When Obamacare passed, President Obama famously said it would not increase the deficit by one dime. That's gone. I think that replaces "you can keep your doctor if you want to" as the greatest lie. Because what we did today was repeal about $400 billion in payments to pay for all the health care that's going out. It's kind of a joke on Republicans. We're getting Obamacare, but we're not paying for it. But on the other hand, as I'll explain in a second, it may ultimately be a joke on Democrats. Now, this concerns me, Mr. President, because we didn't have a committee hearing on it. We haven't had a floor debate, but we've just committed that almost $400 billion that have been used to fund Medicaid expansion, people getting subsidies for their health insurance, and many other things, we just went poof, and it's gone. Now, some of it, like the health insurance tax, was a tax that the insurance industry agreed to so that the Obama administration would force Obamacare upon the rest of us. But now that it's been agreed to and Obamacare is stuck, they don't want to pay the tax. They would rather that go poof. Now, you could do some, people say, wait a second, if we get rid of that tax, maybe insurance premiums go down. One, they don't guarantee it. But secondly, what we could have done, Mr. President, is we could have taken that money, created reinsurance pools across the nation, and that, Mr. President, is estimated to lower premiums by 10 to 20%. In that case, not only would the insurance industry be fulfilling their bargain, hey, you stick the nation with Obamacare, but we'll help pay for it, you would actually be able to use the money to lower premiums. That would be something good. One, they would have kept their word, and two, it would have been good for the American patient, if you will. Mr. President, the other tax that has been gone, just poof, $300 billion, just gone, without debate, without deliberation, without a committee hearing, is still there on Friday. Today we walk in on Monday and it's poof, and we vote on it tomorrow, and I'm the first person to speak on it, is the so-called Cadillac tax. Now, in the Cadillac tax, that is a provision under Obamacare in which high-cost policies, if they go too high, you get taxed on them. And the whole idea is to encourage wiser purchasing of health insurance. Now, frankly, I didn't care for the Cadillac tax. I get the reason it was there. But 100 different economists have said that it serves a purpose across the political spectrum. My preference is that if we had replaced the Cadillac tax, one, we would have paid for it. We shouldn't be getting Obamacare without paying for it. And secondly, we would have gotten some reforms. Reforms that actually would have, if we're not going to use the Cadillac tax to hold down the cost of premiums, it would have been another mechanism by which we can hold down the cost of premiums. Why is this important, Mr. President? Because not only did we just go poof to almost $400 billion, because health care expenditures are driving our debt and deficit. It's not just that we've lost this $400 billion, we've lost any restraint upon policies going higher and higher. Now, that's bad for the American patient. It's bad for the American household because our country will continue its indebtedness. I'm a doctor, Mr. President. I know if you put more money into the furnace, it'll burn that much higher. And now there's just no excuse to try and rein in those expensive policies. But, Mr. President, it's not just that. One thing that my Republicans apparently have agreed with Democrats is to stop the Trump administration from taking on something called silver loading. A little technical here, Mr. President, but just hang with me, because the middle-class family in your state who buys their insurance on the exchange and does not get a subsidy, pop, there goes their premium. How does this happen, Mr. President? When the Trump administration ended the payments from the federal government to insurance companies figured out a way around it. They're smart. They know how to get out of taxes that they've agreed to pay for, as an example. So they did what is called silver loading. They increased the cost of so-called silver policies on the Obamacare exchange. So if you're not getting a subsidy, you're paying a lot more. But because if you're not getting a subsidy, you're paying a lot more, that increased the amount of subsidies for people who were. So if you're, getting a subsidy, you're probably pleased with it. If you're the middle-class person making 400% of federal poverty level and you're paying your taxes and you're trying to do it right, you just got stuck with a higher premium. The administration was trying to take it on. This deal, which we've not discussed, which was not heard in committee, which we've not deliberated on at all, says to the administration, you can't take that on. Yes, that middle-class family not getting a subsidy is paying far more, but you can't take it on. Stand down, administration. We're going to stick it to that family, as well as saying poof to $400 billion. Now, Mr. President, there's some other issues that are important to me. In my state, the National Flood Insurance Program, important program. We've advanced some reforms that would make it more affordable for the homeowner, more sustainable for society, more accountable to the taxpayer. We haven't had anything in there. We've renewed it. I'm pleased that we renewed it. We've renewed it without reforms. And, Mr. President, you've had flooding in my state. I've had flooding in my state. You've had yours and yours. I've had it in mine. We need that program to be sustainable, accountable, and affordable. We've lost the opportunity. I forget how many short-term extensions we've had without reform. I think it's like 10, 12, 14, 16. You lose count after a while. We've missed that opportunity. So we started on Friday. Everybody goes home except for a few people. They work on it over the weekend. They come in on Monday. We get a 2,000-page bill on Monday, Mr. President. We'll vote on it tomorrow. And I'm the first person to speak on it. Now, I understand that impeachment has taken a lot of energy and oxygen out of the chambers. I understand that there's a lot of attention addressed elsewhere. But all I can say is that when you have just imperiled your country's fiscal health. Oh, one more thing, Mr. President, before I wrap up. There's a little bit of an irony here. Republicans are getting Obamacare, but it's unpaid for. There's another irony here as well, Mr. President. The courts today ruled that the individual mandate in Obamacare is unconstitutional. Now, I'm not an attorney, but I gather they did not rule that this was so-called severable. If this is not constitutional, then the rest can stand because we just sever it off. Imagine this, Mr. President. Imagine this. Imagine that the courts decide that portion of Obamacare, which is related to Medicaid expansion and is related to the exchanges in which people get subsidies to buy these policies, is unconstitutional, but would have allowed the mechanism by which to pay for it to stand, because that's another part of the law. We've just repealed that. Why is that important? Because if this falls, we have to have the money to pay for a replacement. So Democrats, who have so long screamed that we need to have universal access — by the way, I'm a doc, I would like everybody to have insurance, I fought for it, I worked for it — but the other party, which has said this is such a high priority, has just eliminated the funding that could be used for a replacement in Texas versus Azar, the court decision that may strike down that portion of Obamacare. So Republicans, we got Obamacare, it's not paid for. Democrats, they may end up with no Obamacare at all. Patients, whether on Medicaid, getting a subsidy or not getting a subsidy, will lose. Mr. President, I hope that we can return to being the world's greatest deliberative body, but as regards that, this has to be considered a low point. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.